Naruto, Bleach, One Piece, Berserk, Death Note. Take these manga, pair it with the worst advice ever, read for pleasure, and you got the perfect recipe for failure. What's up friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Migu and I'm a polyglot who makes videos about productive language learning. And today we're going to talk about manga. Because, quite honestly, manga are the best thing ever. Seriously, manga are great for language learners. I grew up with them and I read them in 3 languages. Well, mostly in French and German, but I also read them in English because at that time manga weren't as popular, so we couldn't afford to be picky and we would read anything we could on the internet, even if it meant to read them in Spanish. And just so you know, I read my very first manga in English way before I even had my very first English lesson. I didn't understand everything, but still I enjoyed the process. Today we're gonna go over what makes reading so tough and how to make it not so tough anymore, and also the things you shouldn't do and the things you should look for when picking up your very first manga. And to finish things off, I'm also gonna talk about my very favorite manga and webtoon specifically for language learners. I read them in at least 3 languages and I also read at least the very first volume of the manga series. I read them in French, German, English, Portuguese and Korean. First things first, reading is tough. I wasn't joking. The worst advice ever is read for pleasure. Anyone saying otherwise has no clue what he's talking about, and the same goes for people who recommend you Harry Potter as your very first book. The best advice, however, is of course read for pleasure at your level. I know people don't like to hear it, but improving your reading skills takes an insane amount of time. But the good news is you can start working on improving your reading skills pretty early on, as long as you read at your level. So, what makes reading so tough? Well, basically, when you start reading in your target language, we tend to focus on words. And we kind of feel this need to understand every single one of them. Let's not do that. Let's do it like we do it in our mother tongue. Skip all the weird words and focus on understanding the big picture. Let's not forget that reading isn't about understanding words. If everything you like is too difficult, then you really need to start reading at your level first. It's a gradual process, and knowing this compared to other people is a huge advantage for you, because those other people, they are gonna spend so much more time on translating, trying to understand difficult and complex sentences, translating words that are not useful, that they are not going to use in daily conversations, and they are going to be frustrated at the end of the day because they are not going to see any progress whatsoever. So again, really read at your level. Alright, let me give you some practical tips. Tip number 1. I suggest you go for a slice of life shoujo manga with a high school setting. These are highly educational. Generally speaking, they have a very short and easy to understand sentences, and they have illustrations that give you visual cues, especially because most emotions are gonna be over the top. However, the worst manga are fantasy and crime fiction manga. Detective Conan is the best example, and people who have tried to read Detective Conan know what I mean. Tip number 2. Do not jump from one manga series to the next one, because when you pick up your very first manga, you may realize pretty early that it's not really easy to read it, and that's totally normal. You're not used to the sentences, you're not used to the vocabulary, you're not familiar with the writing style, and so on. But the more you progress, the easier it will be. So I repeat, do not jump from one manga series to the next one, because you will have the same exact problem with the next manga series. Tip number 3, don't make it too much about learning. What I mean is, do not focus too much on understanding every single word, and also don't look up every single word. It's okay to look them up, obviously, but don't overdo it. Just look them up whenever they are being used over and over again, or when you feel like they are very useful to know to understand the story. Tip number 4, In my opinion, 20-page chapters are best because they aren't too long, and if you want to, you can read one or even a few chapters a day. It's definitely doable. And besides, it's always better to finish a lot of chapters quickly. I like strong starts. Shin-chan. I grew up with the Shin-chan anime and it's hilarious. I started reading the manga for the very first time before making this video, and I do not regret it. It brought back so many good memories. The manga follows the adventures of a 5-year-old boy, but I guess you already knew. Everyone knows Shin-chan, but most people only know about the anime. And believe me, the manga is really good for language learners. Next up is Komi Can't Communicate, and this one is just so good. I never realized how good this one is for language learners before reading it in multiple languages. It's the story about a super beautiful girl who struggles to communicate with people and she just wants to make friends. It's a lovely story. Sentences are really short, they are very simple. This is easily one of my favorite picks, so definitely check this one out. Yotsubato. Adventures of a young girl. Need I say more why this might be a good pick? Everyday adventures, everyday conversations, everyday vocabulary. This is a great start for manga readers. It may look like it's for kids, but actually Yotsubato has been written for adults. But this is a manga suited for all ages, so don't worry. Before going to recommendation number 4, here are 2 honorable mentions: Pokemon and Doraemon. In my honest opinion, these 2 are not as great as my other recommendations, but everyone's recommending them. Maybe they're just copy-pasting whatever they can find on the internet without actually reading them, but maybe I'm the one missing something, so please let me know down below in the comments. Next up is the quintessential quintuplets. This series follows the daily life of a high school student who has been hired as a private tutor for quintuplet. Yes, it's a romantic comedy, but they all go through all sorts of adventures, and even though I'm not a fan of romantic comedy, I really enjoyed this one and I can't wait to finish the series. This one's definitely a shoujo manga. It's called Sawako Kimi ni Todoke, from me to you. This one, compared to the previous recommendations, is slightly more challenging, but I think it's still a great pick. This series follows a timid high school girl who wants to make friends and just live a normal life at high school. Lots of drama and romance. Fruits Basket, another shoujo manga, and this one I wouldn't call an easy to read manga for beginners, but if you want a challenge, then this one will be perfect for you. However, there's one thing I want to mention about this one. The more you read it, the more you're gonna get used to it and the easier it will become. So this one is still doable. Any Webtoon fans here? I have great news. I found a free, perfect Webtoons for language learners. It wasn't easy because most Webtoons that are very popular are usually fantasy webtoons, and those are the worst webtoons you could use to learn languages. The first one is called Ituna, the girl next door. The second one is called Yopjip Tingu, next door friend. And last but certainly not least, because this one is actually the easiest one of those 3, it's called Schoolmate Friend. You can pretty much guess what they are all about because of the titles, and I highly recommend these 3 if you prefer webtoons over manga, even though I believe manga are better. Thanks for watching, it really means a lot. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave lots and lots of comments, and don't be afraid to ask questions, of course. And if you want to support me, share it with fellow language learners, family and friends, and you can also directly support me on coffee.com/hatesmigu. And I guess I will see you in my next one. Bye bye.